July 10th, 1943. The Mediterranean was a vast, cold expanse of darkness, disturbed only by the grinding anxiety of war. This was the hour before dawn, the moment the Allied forces prepared to ignite the next great conflagration, Operation Husky, the invasion of Sicily. This was a military gamble of monumental scale, the largest amphibious operation in history to date. It required a staggering mobilization of might: 160,000 Allied troops, 3,000 ships, and 4,000 aircraft. The success of the entire Mediterranean strategy, the lives of hundreds of thousands of men, rested upon the seamless execution of the first 12 hours. The force was split. The American 7th Army landed in the west. The British 8th Army, under General Bernard Montgomery, was assigned the critical eastern flank. Montgomery's priority was to capture the deep water port of Syracuse and then drive north toward Messina. Speed was paramount. Failure to move swiftly would allow German panzer divisions to solidify their defences, turning the campaign into a costly war of attrition. The logistics were unforgiving. Heavy equipment, tanks, artillery pieces, lorries, could not be continuously unloaded onto unpredictable beaches. The entire force required a deep water port capable of handling large transport ships immediately. That port was Syracuse. The fate of the invasion hinged on securing its entrance. This logistical necessity is what defined the smallest, most vital mission of the entire operation. The success of a force numbering 160,000 men relied entirely upon the actions of just 300. The target was designed to be absolute. Cape Murro di Porco, meaning Pig's Muzzle Cape, was a rocky, natural fortress, offering a commanding view and firing range over the entire southern approach to Syracuse. The Italian defences here were sophisticated and layered. The primary threat came from the four 152mm naval guns. These were heavy-caliber, long-range weapons set into solid concrete emplacements called casemates, built to withstand direct hits from naval destroyers. Their steel doors were thick, and their embrasures, the firing openings, were strategically angled to cover the approach lanes. The Italian artillery utilized a complex fire control system connected to the central communications bunker and observation posts. To disable the guns, the Special Reconnaissance Regiment would need to sever this nervous system. The intelligence briefs indicated the Italian garrison was composed of a mix of coastal defense artillerymen and regular infantry, totaling nearly 800 men across the wider defense sector. The odds were starkly unfavorable. The man chosen for this impossible mission was Major Robert Blair Paddy Mayne. Mayne was a figure of profound contradictions. He was a graduate in law but also a former international rugby player, possessing immense physical strength and relentless focus. This unusual combination of intellect and aggression made him the ideal commander for the task. He moulded the new Special Raiding Squadron, 300 men trained not just for reconnaissance, but for decisive assault. The Cape Murro di Porco raid would be the ultimate test of Mayne's raw courage and strategic mind. The men of the SRS were an elite evolution of the Desert Raiders. Mayne utilized his authority to enforce his singular military philosophy. His doctrine was utterly simple: speed over stealth. The goal was to achieve shock and confusion on such a scale that the enemy could not rally, recover, or radio for help. The SRS was trained to treat the loss of surprise not as a disaster, but as a cue for maximum, immediate violence. The training was grueling and highly specialized. These veterans had to master amphibious warfare, rehearsing landings from landing craft assault onto steep, rocky terrain in total darkness. The 300-men unit was divided into small, autonomous strike teams, each with a specific objective. Their watches were synchronized to the second. The attack plan was a brutal equation: immediate violence equals decisive success. The landing was executed at 2:45 a.m., July 10th. The SRS scrambled ashore in near silence. They were within striking distance of the main gun batteries, but even the sharpest spear can be blunted by a single flaw, and the destiny of the entire invasion hung on the next few seconds. In that critical, tense darkness, the silence was brutally obliterated. A soldier maneuvering through the perimeter defences snagged a wire. The wire snapped. The flare ignited. The surprise was instantly sacrificed. Maine's response was immediate. He roared the attack command, his voice cutting through the sudden flare light. Go, go, go! The decision to choose overwhelming aggression saved the mission. The men surged forward. The headland erupted. The Italian defence unleashed a frantic volley of machine gun fire. The air was thick with the sharp snap of tracer rounds and the heavy, acrid smell of cordite. Private Jones, heart pounding, gripped his Bren gun tighter. He saw Sergeant McIntyre fall, hit by a burst from a bunker embrasure. Jones shifted his aim, laying down a sustained burst of fire to cover McIntyre's extraction. The immediate personal violence of the battle was horrifying, but Maine's roar, a sound that seemed closer to a primal challenge than a human voice, kept the line charging forward. From the Italian bunkers, the charging shadows seemed like demons from the night, moving with unnatural speed. The SRS focused their fire, suppressing the machine gun nests that ringed the perimeter. The ultimate objective was the total permanent destruction of the 4 152mm guns. This required a surgical plan against high-grade military hardware. The demolition teams relied on two tools, the satchel charge and the gammon bomb. The satchel charges were meticulously placed against the gun's most critical components, the breech block assembly and the heavy trunnions that support the barrel. The charge needed to be precisely wired to ensure the blast fractured the hardened steel, rendering the gun permanently incapable of elevation or firing. The most effective weapon was the gammon bomb. This was a highly flexible bag filled with up to 4 pounds of plastic explosive. The Commandos slapped these onto the vulnerable, delicate components of the system, the sighting apparatus and the hydraulic recoil cylinders. The gammon bomb, unlike traditional stick grenades, allowed for customizable explosive yields, and its plastic casing conformed perfectly to the gun's structural vulnerabilities, ensuring maximum energy transfer directly into the mechanism's core. The resulting shockwave shattered the finely calibrated steel, guaranteeing the weapon was rendered inert. Maine personally supervised the destruction of the final battery, leaving nothing to chance. The resulting series of sharp, bone-rattling internal detonations turned high-grade naval hardware into useless scrap. The guns fell silent, but Maine's eyes turned to a greater horizon, the glittering prize of Syracuse. With the guns destroyed, Maine immediately operationalized the victory. He recognized the profound psychological devastation inflicted on the remaining Italian garrisons and pressed the attack, ignoring the conventional wisdom to consolidate. The SRS column bypassed strong points and drove hard for the harbour. This was a direct example of turning a tactical success into a strategic breakthrough. By 11:30 a.m. that morning, only hours after the landing, the Special Raiding Squadron was fighting its way into the crucial harbour district of Syracuse. Their swift, unexpected presence achieved two critical consequences. First, they prevented the Italian forces from carrying out their prepared demolition plan, securing the docks, jetties and warehouses largely intact. Second, the capture of a deep-water port within hours of the invasion meant Montgomery's 8th Army could immediately unload tanks and supplies directly onto a functioning quay. The audacity of Maine had secured the entire logistical foundation of the Sicilian campaign. For the demoralized Italians, the raid shattered illusions of security. The sheer brutality of the initial assault was confirmed by the Italian losses at the Cape, estimated at between 50 and 60 soldiers killed or seriously wounded, leading to the immediate surrender of approximately 450 Italian soldiers who were captured in the Syracuse area. For the Allies, it ignited a surge of confidence that spread across the fleet. The smallest unit had secured the largest logistical bridgehead of the entire campaign. The success at Cape Murro di Porco was a direct mirror of the man who led it. Maine's unique leadership was rooted in his contradictory nature. He was a solicitor and a poet, yet he unleashed a primal force in combat. His aggression stemmed from his life as an international sportsman. As a British lion, he learned to channel his immense physical strength and intense mood swings into controlled dominance. War simply offered a larger, more existential stage. What drove a solicitor to become a legend of destruction? Perhaps the same fire that burns in every warrior, unleashed by the chaos of war. His personal involvement ensured the SRS suffered minimal casualties, a testament to the decisiveness of his command. One veteran spoke of Maine in action, stating, "You felt you couldn't be touched when he was leading you." He treated the most brutal necessity of war as a personal challenge, securing victory through sheer, overwhelming will. Maine's difficulty in transitioning back to civilian life was profound. The constant, extreme pressure of combat had suppressed deep psychological turmoil. When the war ended, that vital suppressive mechanism was gone. The calm, structured life of a solicitor offered no relief from the memories. He often sought the dangerous excitement of physical confrontation, which was the only way he knew how to process the trauma. Maine was one of the most decorated soldiers of the war, earning the Distinguished Service Order and eventually 3 bars to that award. Yet, his recommendation for the Victoria Cross remains the ultimate point of controversy. The recommendation, fiercely supported by his colleagues, acknowledged his sustained, extraordinary leadership. But the British establishment struggled with Maine's methods. His style, characterized by overwhelming aggression and a pragmatic brutality, was seen as too rough for the nation's highest honor. The political layers behind the Victoria Cross denial were complex. The Victoria Cross Committee, influenced by the desire to maintain a specific, almost chivalric ideal of military gallantry, often viewed the brutal systemic destruction inherent in Special Forces raids with suspicion. Maine's heroism was a campaign of decisive action, contrasting sharply with the traditional VC award for a single, selfless act of sacrifice. The failure to grant the VC was a quiet, institutional declaration. Though Maine's operational effectiveness was undeniable, the brutality that secured victories like Murro di Porco was ultimately too unsettling for official national celebration. This failure left a deep sense of injustice among his veterans. Maine's personal battle continued after the war. He found civilian life utterly intolerable. The intense focus and adrenaline that fueled his wartime success vanished, replaced by a consuming restlessness. Maine's struggles foreshadow the recognition of post-traumatic stress disorder in modern veterans. He wrestled with the human cost of his audacity, a psychological burden the violence of combat had previously held in check. His life ended tragically. He died in a car crash in 1955 in Northern Ireland at the age of 40. The manner of his death, alone, in a sudden violent event, seemed to tragically mirror the life he led. But the raid on Cape Murro di Porco remains a foundational moment for modern Special Forces doctrine. It proved that a small unit, utilizing speed and shock, could eliminate massive fixed defenses and dictate the tempo of a large-scale invasion. This doctrine, the deep strike and seizure of vital assets, became the template for forces across the globe. The ghost of Paddy Maine and the shadow of his 300 men continue to inform the ethos of every Special Forces soldier today. They secured not just a crucial port in Sicily, but a permanent, brutal lesson in warfare. In today's era of remote warfare and sanitized conflict, does Maine's raw audacity and personal risk still echo? Or have we lost the visceral human element he represented? That question remains central to understanding the true cost of war.